Imagine Google Photos, Instagram, and Slack had a baby for construction. Well, that's what our guest today, Lee Mills, is building at Pixly.ai. Lee has worked in senior marketing roles at a number of companies of various sizes. He's got all kinds of startup experience, and he was recently named one of the top 500 most influential people in San Diego. But before all that, he started out in the Navy, and we talk about how his experience in the military informed his purpose and drive for everything afterwards. So let's jump into this conversation with Lee Mills. Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military. How's it going, man?
Awesome. Thank you.
It's a nice looking shirt.
Yeah, I just got it out for you guys.
You didn't have to do that.
Where are all my branded shirts? So they're not always as easy to find as I think.
Well, it's good to see you. You're
Yeah, man. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Jack. Lee is in, I don't know if you're currently there, Lee, but Lee is in one of the few areas that sometimes rivals Hawaii, and i.e. San Diego. I know you were thinking I was going to say Raleigh, but I actually said San Diego.
That's been a recurring joke. No, I love San Diego. That's awesome. We grew up visiting San Diego as a kid, so I always look at San Diego through rose-colored glasses. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I love it. It's gotten insanely expensive, but the Navy is what brought me here. I'm originally from New Jersey and then Indiana. Then once you come here, it's really hard to leave.
Right. Yeah, that's
Unless you
kind of
wanna buy
our
a
story
house.
with Hawaii.
Well, if you're comparing it,
Hawaii, dude, I love Hawaii. I could live there too.
if you're
Oh, yeah.
comparing it to New Jersey and Indiana, then you're like, man, I could move anywhere to be better than where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been in the Midwest too much, but it's like concrete gray skies. It's probably negative 15 degrees right now.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like 65 and sunny today, and it's December 5th. So
Right.
I'm probably overly critical in the Midwest, but I've been there once and that was plenty. So
I get it, man. I get it. I get it. What island are you on?
We're on Oahu.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Similar to what you said, the Army brought us here about 5 years ago, and I transitioned about 7 months ago. So now
Okay.
we're just living life here and solidly anchored here with a bunch of businesses and family. So just kind of loving it. So
Yeah, it helps to have some anchors.
yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
awesome. Do you surf?
yeah. I have surfed. I would not say that I'm an avid surfer, but it's something that when people come, we generally take them out and go surfing. But
Cool.
we kind of Courtney and I joke. We joke that we work in Hawaii. We don't necessarily live in Hawaii, just because we got a lot going on. So
I get it. I
um,
totally get it. Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's fun. And I got three little kids, so I'm sure once they're a little older, might take up surfing with them. But they're
Right on.
like, for the last couple of years, they've been, my youngest was like eating sand mode, real young. So the beach wasn't necessarily too high on our priority list.
Yeah. Yeah. I was once, well, I've been to Hawaii a bunch of times for the Navy, and then I came to San Diego. I'm like, I have to learn how to surf. And it's like the hardest thing I've ever learned. And I've had my ass handed to me more times than I can count. But once you do stand up and catch a wave, like changed my life. And
Oh
then
yeah.
I have a buddy that lives in Hawaii, and he was away. He let me stay in his house. He gave me keys to his truck and his surfboards. He's like, go anywhere you want. And I have this Surfline app that tells you where to go and where not to go. And so I'm like, I really like the Waikiki area because it's just generally pretty chill. But I was one break too far south at Alana Bowls. And dude, I got vibed out so hard. These guys were like cussing at me and yelling.
And there's some other, surf spots that are pretty welcoming, but there are definitely those that are like, if you're not 20 years or more, like born and raised Hawaii, then you're not supposed to be there.
I get it. There's some places that are kind of not nearly as, that's the most aggression I've ever felt. I was just like, wow.
Yeah. Living with aloha, right?
There was no aloha that day, but there's some aggressive spots in San Diego, but by no means not that aggressive.
Right. Right.
Whoever,
So, where in San
whoever's having
Diego?
the most fun.
Where in
Encinitas, which is like North
Oh,
Palm
yeah.
Beach, San Diego. When I got out, my first apartment was right behind this beach bar called Lahaina's on the boardwalk in Mission Beach. So I always knew when it was 10 o'clock. And then that was about a year. And then I lived in Ocean Beach for a couple years and back to Pacific Beach, which was great. Then I moved up here about 8 years ago.
Yeah, Lee, you mentioned that the Navy took you out there. We'd love to just start by zooming in a little bit on that point of time in your life. A little bit of background on your military service, but also the transition specifically. The purpose of this podcast is to give people
Yeah.
an inside story into transition stories and processes that other people have gone through, and then how they kind of navigated the path after that. So, would love to start off by hearing about your service and a little bit about your transition period, and then we can get into more details of what you've been doing since.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ultimately, it was a while ago. I was in the Navy like 30 years ago, believe it or not. And this was just like right before the internet. So ultimately, I like to save anybody any of the pain that I went through. Like TAPS was like not the most pleasant experience for me. We could touch on that later, but I figured out everything the hard way. So yeah, I was starting to tell you guys, I'm originally from New Jersey. My parents were New Yorkers. They commuted to New York for work and kind of missed out on their kids growing up. So then we moved to South Bend, Indiana, which was a great place to grow up. It was a shocking contrast to the New Jersey Shore, not like the MTV Jersey Shore, but the nice Jersey Shore. Yeah, I had a good childhood there, played sports, was super active, did all types of stuff, dirt bikes, snowmobiles, lots of fun. Went to Holy Cross for a year, and then I decided I wanted to join the Navy. My dad and his twin brother were in the Army, but my favorite uncle was in the Navy, and I always liked the idea of the Navy. So I wanted to serve and I wanted to man up basically, and I wanted to get money for school. So I joined the Navy and I was assigned to the USS Constellation CV-64, which was America's largest flag and also America's flagship aircraft carrier back at that time. Unbeknownst to me, that it was in a service life extension program, which means it's a giant construction project. So imagine the most complex construction project in the world. There's nothing more complex than rebuilding or building an aircraft carrier or a submarine. But that turned out to be a great experience for me, actually, because since I knew how to use computers, I was basically tasked with like managing project management of spaces and equipment and some other things. That was in Philadelphia, which was fun. It was hard. Don't get me wrong. It was a really, really hard time, but it was a good experience. And then we got the ship seaworthy and did lots of sea trials, and we sailed it around South America. It was way too big to go through the Panama Canal. That brought me to San Diego, and I finished my tour in San Diego. Went out to sea a bunch of times. Loved the Navy, loved the camaraderie, learned everything I learned there, leadership, and just get stuff done. There's the right way, there's the wrong way, there's a Navy way, there's plans. There's a plan for everything, and it kind of really instilled on me the importance of documentation, which will kind of play into where I've come from since then. But yeah, so it's 4 years as on the aircraft carrier Constellation, originally for supply, and I spent a lot of time as a damage control petty officer, which was fun. Every single bolt, nut, everything on a ship has a planned maintenance schedule to be inspected and repaired and replaced before it needs to be repaired or replaced, basically. Also, which impacted my career further on. So yeah, I got out and I was trying to decide what to do with myself. I knew I wanted to go to school. My dad was a creative director. I always enjoyed doing art and drawing and design. So I went to school for advertising, for graphic design. And the GI Bill didn't go very far. So I simultaneously was working full-time as a telemarketer. So I was the guy calling back then, selling long distance services, which was brutal. But if you want to cut your teeth in sales, there's no better way than to do cold calling and massive volume telemarketing. So I actually became pretty good at that, and then started doing some other programs where I became a sales trainer and then a sales manager. And then after 3.5 years of doing that, I was responsible for 200 sales reps, full P&L, hiring, training, unfortunately some firing. And then as soon as I graduated, I wanted to jump into tech. And I've been in tech pretty much ever since.
So what was it that kind of led that transition? I mean, what did you have I know you probably weren't super stoked about being in telemarketing, but what was it like? What was going through your mind when you were going through that transition period? Did you have a career path that was first and foremost, or were you just kind of taking the next best step based off some connections you had?
Well, I knew I was going to have a career in sales marketing because I've always been very entrepreneurial. And as a kid, I was either raking leaves, shoveling snow, babysitting, washing cars, whatever I could to scrape together money because I couldn't wait to buy my first car. And I worked even through high school at a car wash and had some other jobs. So, and my mom was an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur, retired entrepreneur. She had 3 stores at one time. And so I spent many weekends and holidays working for her. So after the experience of the Navy and there's very strong sense of chain of command, I'm like, I don't want to answer to anybody. I want to work for myself. And so I saw that telemarketing was basically a stepping stone into sales and sales training, and a way I could keep the lights on and afford my rent and everything else while I went to school, knowing that was just for the purpose of getting myself through school. And then once I got through school, I knew I wanted to get into tech. And I created a career for myself in tech. I answered an ad in a newspaper for a company called backup.com that did online backups, and they needed somebody in business development. And so I took that role, and it's been an awesome roller coaster ride ever since.
Can you tell us about what you're currently doing?
Yeah, for sure. So I really wanted to get into tech startups early, because if you can and you choose the right one, there could be a life-changing financial experience. I've always been aiming for that. Still aiming for that. But I like to build things and fix things and solve problems. So yeah, I did a couple years at backup.com. One of my major partners was a company called, or they're still around, called PC Mag. And that was like the leading publication for anything computer and software related. And my partner's name there was a lady named Cindy Crow. And she asked me if I would do her a favor, to which I replied, of course, you're one of my best partners. What can I do for you? And so she had a client, don't laugh too hard, launching some new products, and he needed help with online marketing. He didn't know how to do it. And the client was Olympus, and they were launching their first digital cameras. So I went up and I met with them, and I talked about my market strategy, how I find the right audience and the right websites and tailor messaging and do campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. They asked me if I would do that for them. And I said no, because I had a full-time job and no bandwidth, but they pressured me and asked me for a number. I gave them one, and I walked out of there with my first consulting client. And that's when I started my marketing agency called Beyond Clicks. That was in the late 90s. And then since then, I still do some fractional consulting for select clients through that, but mainly I go in-house. And I've done that for Anonymizer, which did internet anonymity before VPNs were cool. Had a small exit with those guys. Got recruited to a turnaround startup in Switzerland. That was awesome. I just moved to Switzerland without ever being there before. I said, why not? Let's go for it. That's a story in itself. Came back, and I was recruited to be number 3 for a company called Mojo Pages. That was a competitor to Yelp. And that was a super exciting ride for 5 years. And then I kind of fell into, the universe guided me into what we call construction tech or prop tech or commercial real estate and technology. And so a friend of mine was the first co-founder for a company called Raken that does what's called construction daily reports. Sounds really boring, but it's really important. And they were starting to take off, and they asked me for some marketing help, and I gave them some, and I started talking to the customers. And that's when I had my aha moment, because construction people are a lot like military people. They're proud Americans. They're just straight up direct, like they call it like they see it. They also answer their phone all the time. And they're just like good dudes, mostly dudes, good people all around. And they needed help. They need to save time so they can go home and not miss out on their kids growing up. So I helped them get to the first $1 million in sales in less than a year. And part of my go-to-market strategy is always partner with bigger players. And at that time, it was Procore and PlanGrid and a few others. That led to me going to PlanGrid, which had a huge exit, one of the biggest in the space. And after visiting hundreds of job sites for Raken and for PlanGrid, I realized the industry just needs like a super simple way to document, collaborate on projects with photos. And the reason for that is because 30% of projects have disputes, and the average dispute's $50 million. So whoever has the best documentation wins the dispute. Now, there's 3 different workflows. Believe it or not, people will go to a job site every day, take a bunch of photos, organize them on a folder, whatever, put them in a PowerPoint, and then email them to dozens of different people every day or every week. That's a huge waste of time. The other workflow is there's all-encompassing, more complex construction project management software. But because it's so complex, it takes 2 or 3 minutes to get to the camera, and they're not used to capture enough photos. The third workflow is people just take photos and text them back and forth all day. The reason all 3 of those are a problem is because a dispute could happen like today or next week, like somebody installed new windows in your house and they're leaking, or 10 years from now, the roof on a data center is leaking, and then everybody's pointing fingers at each other. Everybody's looking for their documentation, but they can't find it. So enter Pixly. One customer said it's like Google Photos, Instagram, and Slack had a baby for construction. You simply open it, go straight to the camera, you take photos, everything's time, date, location stamped, and pinned to maps. I started it right before COVID, not knowing COVID was going to happen, but somehow survived COVID, kept it going. And this really ties into a really important part of this conversation and my experience in the Navy and being a veteran. So there's a venture capital fund called the Veteran Fund. So my big message, if you're a veteran and you can do the military, you can do anything, and you should start your own business. So there's this group called the Veteran Fund, and they had a pitch competition at the Military Influencer Conference in Las Vegas. And the pitch competition's for a $100,000 investment, which is a lot. It's a substantial amount of money. To apply, you have to be a veteran. So over 100, I think close to 110 veterans applied. I made it to the semifinals and the finals, and I made it to the final 5. And I went to this military influence conference, and I had total imposter syndrome for a little while, because I mean, these are guys and gals that were in Afghanistan and Iraq and battle hardened, and I had it easy compared to them. But I got over that, and I won the competition. And so the Navy has served me well. I would not be there without it, and my startup would not be there without it, because we really needed that funding. So I poured that back into the business. Fast forward to today, we've got close to 3,000 users, a couple dozen customers. We're growing. We're raising capital. It's a really exciting time. But I couldn't do any of it without my experience as a Navy, because most entrepreneurs, the biggest reason startups fail is because the founder quits, and I'm not going to quit.
That's amazing. Well, Lee, there's so many things I want to double click on in your story, but maybe we'll start with, you've obviously had an extensive experience, but you've bounced around from several different marketing gigs, business development, all kinds of similar line of work, but you've had a host of different experiences. A lot of people say find your lane and kind of be consistent in it, keep on building the same bridge and connect that bridge to the other side. And that's when you really start seeing results. You've kind of built a bunch of different bridges, or at least started different bridges. How did you view jumping around and finding, maybe following, the energy that you found, or how did you view that process? Because a lot of people, and this is a long way of asking a question, but a lot of people leave the military thinking they have to commit the next decade of their life to what they choose. And that's just
No.
not the case. And it's so proven by your story.
Oh man, yeah, no, that's awesome. Actually, oftentimes you get a job and you're like, oh, it's the honeymoon period. You're getting your new computer and getting all set up, and you get organized, and you learn about the business and the problems you're solving and everything else. And you're super excited. And 3 or 4 months go by, and then it's going okay. And 6 months go by, like, oh man, there's a lot of politics, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, or this isn't what I was expecting, or you didn't look underneath the hood and there's problems with the product or whatever, and it starts to not be fun. Don't do things that are not fun. You're not I'm not doing anything for more than 4 years unless I love it. So I would reference back to my enlistment, honestly. I've had some jobs that lasted 5 years or more. I've had some that lasted 1 year, because I'm like, I'm not happy here, and life is too short to spend time doing something that doesn't make me happy. I'll tell you, one of the hard parts is finding people that are civilian, that will work as hard as we work and have the same work ethic. That will be
Yeah.
that can be I don't want to say consistent, but that can be a common letdown.
But it's not like you had all extensive marketing experience or business development. I mean, it wasn't like you left the military and had this large tool bag of experience. I mean,
Yeah.
and you mentioned imposter syndrome. I think a lot of people leave the military and they're like, well, what career? Like I was just an infantryman, or I was just, parachuting out of planes. And how does that translate to the civilian world? How would you speak to those sort of folks? And it seems like you've picked up a bunch of skills and really built those building blocks along the way through these varied experiences.
Yeah, a couple things. So I didn't have the background or experience to like work for a Fortune 500 company or an MBA or anything like that. So it's easier to create opportunities with startups. You don't make as much, and there's a lot more risk, but you can learn a lot and do a lot. And so the first startup, backup.com, I mean, I learned a ton, and they had some really smart people there, and I volunteered for everything, and I was just a sponge. And a buddy of mine was starting a internet marketing association called iMarketers. And at first it was just like a dozen people talking, having a beer and talking about, don't laugh too hard. How do you track this email open? How do you track this website visitor? Like, we were literally looking through paper logs before there was Google Analytics. And that turned into a group of 100, and then it turned into a group of over 1,000, and different marketers, including myself, would come in and say, here is my challenge. Here's how I solved it. Here's the results, and here's how you can do it too. And then my buddy asked me to be the president of that association. And I said, yes, of course, I'd love to, although I was terrified. He goes, okay, you have to do one thing. I'm like, what? Toastmasters. You need to be a better public speaker. Like, okay, so what's the most, I don't know how scary it is jumping out of a plane for the 100th time, but most people are terrified of going up and talking in front of 100 people, myself included. But I did this Toastmasters course and it really, really helped me. So I guess the answer to your question is like find groups, find associations, volunteer. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually motivated to join my Rotary Club. But I think things like that and surrounding yourself with people. Also, after the veteran fund pitch competition and winning that, I'm like, okay, I'm going all in on being a veteran. There's a group called Bunker Labs. So if you have an idea for a business, Bunker Labs can help you get squared away and figure out your messaging and your value prop and surround yourself with other veterans. That's really helpful because for being an entrepreneur, it can be really, really lonely. I also doubled down and I volunteered, where I've submitted myself and was approved for the PenFed Veteran Entrepreneur Investment Program. That was also helpful. And just find people that don't be afraid to ask people for help or for advice or to open a door for you.
Absolutely. We've had a number of people on this podcast that have, it's a very small ecosystem within the veteran kind of startup world and venture world. And the more you start digging into it, the more it all starts connecting back to one another. And there's all kinds of, tons of opportunity out there.
Yeah.
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 I do. I love that you said, I mean, the value of working with a startup might not be monetarily off the bat, but it's similar with the military in that you get more responsibility than you probably should get. And I think that, like, if you're ready, if you're hungry, if you're ready to go for that type of thing, you get that in the military. But if you want to transition and still have that steep learning curve and learn a lot right off the bat, it's if you go join Amazon, you might not be kind of thrown with the wolves, right? But with a startup, they need you to handle three people's jobs, so you can learn a lot really quickly. And I love that you highlighted that because that is something that you learn from the military. And I think you get that. You have sometimes you have 25-year-olds in charge of 100-person organizations, but with startups, you definitely get that responsibility too. And it's phenomenal to say that, yeah, just be involved. Be involved in your community, in other organizations. All of those places are looking for people to provide value, but a lot of those organizations give a lot of value too. So, the imposter syndrome thing, everybody feels that. Like, don't feel like you have to provide value right off the bat. Sometimes you join those organizations as, a little bit on the end of needing some of the value. And eventually you will, through relationships or whatever, you'll find where you can provide value and where you can bring something to the organization that will be appreciated. But
Yeah.
that's awesome. It sounds like you do a lot, like, or at least seek out
Yeah.
a lot of those relationships.
Yeah. I was part of like the San Diego Ad Club, San Diego Direct Marketing Association. I'd go to all these events and stuff. It's important to get out there and meet people in person. For sure, it goes a long way. And then recently, I just had to be selfish and not volunteer for anything because I had to focus on this business and my daughter. And you have to be careful with your time, man. Time goes by really fast.
Yeah.
Well, and congratulations are due to Lee as well. He was named, maybe this wasn't as recent as what I saw, but he was named a top 500 most influential people in San Diego. So I'm sure that's largely tied to involvement in all those organizations. That's awesome, Lee.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I try and pay it forward. So it was years ago, but the best thing I've ever done, honestly, besides become a dad, is to mentor at-risk youth through Big Brothers or Big Sisters, San Diego, any town. But I was in 2014, I was San Diego Big Brother of the Year. And that's the best feeling in the world. If you can, honestly, this is my plug. If you can find a few hours a month, you can make a huge difference in a young person's life. I really, really push for that. And I want to do more of that. But I mentored at Connect. I mentored other startups through Connect, through Founders Institute. And yeah, I just want to pay it forward. If I could help people, few things feel better than helping other people succeed.
Well said. That's amazing work that you do. You mentioned the mentorship, especially with other startups. What are some things you've noticed about successful founders or startup leaders that might be helpful for someone transitioning out of the military to focus their efforts on that might help them be a successful founder?
That's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I would say find a co-founder. It's hard. It helps to have somebody come with you. Depends on what you're doing. And there's some great opportunities out there. I would say there's so much opportunities in construction. You could start a plumbing company, an electrical company, a concrete company, and you could be what we call a blue collar millionaire in a short amount of time. Absolutely. If you have an idea for a tech startup or an app or something super innovative, go for it for sure. You'll not regret going for it. You'll regret not trying. But that, I think that could be a little bit harder. But find a co-founder. It would be my biggest thing. And find somebody that you enjoy working with that can support you and do the things that you're not so strong at.
Yeah,
So I'm really strong at sales, marketing, biz dev, relationship building, all that stuff. I can't write a line of code to save my life. I can write headlines all day.
With the idea of a co-founder, personally asking the question, but also I think it's beneficial for people transitioning out and starting their own thing, covering down on blind spots and having somebody as an accountability partner, obviously the main benefits of having that co-founder. Would you go for equity right off the bat and find somebody who can share in the ownership of the company when you say co-founder, or are you more on leaning towards like, hey, just paying for expertise and having them on the team for a short period of time?
I mean, it depends on the stage of the company. If it's a brand new company and you're a co-founder, and you're giving somebody the title of co-founder, it means they have equity. If you're just paying them a salary, and there's nothing wrong with that, then they're really an employee. I don't necessarily like the word employee, like team member better, but early on, yeah, you want people to be properly incentivized. There's an app out there, a website called Y Combinator, and it's a huge, probably the world's most well-known incubator, and they have a co-founder matching site. So either you have an idea already and you're looking for a co-founder, or you don't have an idea, but you want to be a co-founder, you can find those people listed on there.
You mentioned the blue collar millionaire. I think that's a big push right now. People are realizing that there's an ability to not just be a plumber and make $60,000 a year. If you include technology a little bit and are smart with advertising, there's a big way to make some really crazy money, especially in markets like where you're at or Hawaii. With people transitioning out, I want to really highlight that with people. And just because you don't have the ability or the training to be a plumber or something, that doesn't mean you can't pursue those things and get those things eventually, right? I'm sure personally going through the licensing requirements in Hawaii, which are I hope are the worst in the country. I don't know if there's any other state that has as high of a requirement for their blue collar workers as Hawaii does, but it's definitely, I'm sure it's, if anything, California would probably take the cake just based on what I know. But we're working on trying to figure out how to get people who are transitioning from service who don't have technical experience in those jobs, like how to get them into the space and actually license and work through it. There's a company called, I think it's Hard Hats for Heroes, or that we're reaching out to and trying to figure out, hey, like what opportunities are there for transitioning service members to actually get these licenses? But
yeah, well, there's the Association of General Contractors, there's the Association of Building Contractors, and then every specialty trade has an association too, and you basically got to get your foot in the door and become an apprentice. They need apprentices.
Lee, you mentioned how similar the blue collar industries are to the military, and I couldn't agree more. Now I've been working with water damage restoration companies, buying them and helping them grow afterwards. And it's uncanny. When I first started in the industry, I went to one of our companies to get my feet wet a little bit and see what their day-to-day looks like. And it was as if I was walking back into an Army motor pool. I mean, load plans. They were doing some version of PT in the morning. They had kind of a rank or hierarchy structure. And granted, I was biased because it's a very well-run, a great company, which is why we partner with them. But right. I couldn't agree more, man. It's a perfect segue and transition kind of industry, just blue collar home services at large, but from the military into that, because it just aligns so closely. But also, to your point, there's so much potential to make money in that industry too, and people don't realize that. I mean, there's home services companies that are trading for multiples that are similar to some tech companies. So it might seem like the trendy thing to do to have a tech startup or some sort of highly technical skilled startup if you're looking at being a founder. But I think the home services are equally, in a lot of cases, more lucrative, because there's a lot of people that are avoiding those, frankly, because they want something that looks more flashy or whatever.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with hard work for sure. And a lot of those guys, if you're entrepreneurial and you can just have some basic business sense and understand how to get customers, or I'll help you do it. I'll tell you how. You can do anything. And I've got to plug Pixly right now for those companies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear. For one, well, I wanted to go back to that, Lee, because I love the way that you frame it. I think it's such a powerful way of giving a comparison. You said Google Photos, Instagram, and Slack had a baby for construction. That's like perfect way for anyone listening to this or talking to you to immediately picture what you guys do. So tell us more about Pixely.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. A customer said that quote, but I
Well, I mean,
but I
that's the best. That
yeah.
means that you're the best marketer ever. The best marketers listen to their customers, and it became your taglines. That's great.
Yeah, man, I try. I'm not perfect. I'm still trying to learn, but yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, the problem for construction, whether you're remodeling bathrooms or kitchens or building a hospital or a church or a school or a library or whatever it is, there's tons of moving parts. You got the owner, the architect, the designer, the general contractor, hire subcontractors, do the actual work. And because there's so many moving parts and so many pieces to do it right, like for example, one of my biggest customers is called Kitchen Savers. These guys do 600 kitchen and bathroom remodels a week. And we save them 45 minutes a day per project. So they come to your house, they say, all right, you signed up for your new kitchen. They come in, they take photos of all the pre-existing conditions. You might have a nice shiny refrigerator over there, and if there's a dent already in it, they don't want to get blamed for it. So they document everything before they go in, and then they start tearing everything out, and they take photos of all the tear out. And sometimes, more often than not, there might be mold behind the kitchen sink. So then they have mold remediation. That has to be very carefully photographed and documented that they did that properly. So they document all that and they document it all being put back in. Those photos automatically sync back to their mothership and their CRM. And instead of texting and emailing and uploading the folders. And so we also help protect them from warranty claims. So that's on the home remodel restoration side. We actually have a Navy SEAL customer who's got a very successful custom home building company in Coronado that you might want to have on here. Patriot Builders, really good, great guys. And then at the top, we have a 10-year, $500 million expansion project for a hospital. And they use Pixly every day to document projects. And then, as you know this, or you don't, so with Pixel, you can take a photo or a video, you can tap on it, and you can add a tag. A tag could be inspection, owner, paint, concrete, whatever. You can draw on the photo to point out what it is, and then you can assign it to somebody as a task. And so, okay, you got assigned fixing this drywall on Thursday at 2 o'clock, and you can see when it's been completed or not, or if there's back and forth questions on what it is, it's all captured in a super, super simple, easy to use app for the field that connects the office via the desktop or whatever the other tablet they want to use. So you don't have to go back and forth and have unnecessary travel to job sites. So it's all about saving time, saving money, improving documentation, reducing the risk of disputes. 30% have disputes, and helping people get home faster and less stress.
I'm far from a tech guy, as evidenced by this question, but I mean, the data storage and the cloud storage of all this has to be immense, right?
Yeah. So before, also like from a tech founder type of thing, before we wrote any code or designed anything, I took like mock-ups to target customers and said, hey, would you use it if it looked like this? Made a bunch of iterations before we actually wrote anything. But while we made the app super simple and easy to use for the field, the back end of it, the architecture and everything else is quite complicated. So it's all built on AWS on their cloud. And yeah, I'm stoked. I actually just got a grant from them to start building our proof of concept for our AI features.
Wow.
Yeah, so apply for grants if you're going to go out on your own venture. There's something I haven't gotten any yet, but I'm optimistic I will.
Well, I mean, not to go down that rabbit hole too far, but tell us more about, I mean, is it as simple as like Googling grants for X industry, or how did you find those and go about that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that simple. So, like I mentioned, I'm really more of a sales, marketing, biz dev, partnership guy. I can write headlines. I can't write code, and I'm probably not that great at writing grants either. So, our grant submissions can be very, very technical and very tedious.
Yeah, your
And
grant was too
um,
exciting, declined.
but there's money out there. The gov is basically it's called non-dilutive funding. So if you apply for a grant, like I'm applying for an SBIR grant,
Mhm.
and that SBIR grant comes in different phases. The first phase is all about R&D, and if you're accepted, they'll give you $305,000 to build it. And then if they like what you built, then you go to the second phase, which could be up to 1.5 million. So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force have different SBR programs all around different research that can be dual purpose or helpful. And the government has other grant programs too. Like Pixly is considered dual use. So when I think about all the stuff that needs to be repaired and maintained and updated on an aircraft carrier or anything else, I've had guys say, man, this would be awesome for the Jeep pool. You bring the Jeep back. This is what needs to be, this is what was broken, needs to be repaired. Assign it to Johnny. Johnny proves that it's done. It's all tracked. But yeah, I use the company. I just signed up for a company called Grantify to help me with that process. They require a small fee, but supposedly they have a over 70% success rate. So I'm bullish that I'm going to get some grant funding based on what we're trying to do with AI.
Wow. And they do
Nice.
sievers as well.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, even the way that you're speaking about it, even smaller companies, do you have anything that's like client facing or CRM built into it? Or is it more for like the commercial side of things that doesn't really have a lot of clients interaction?
That's a great question. So based on my experience at Rakin and PlanGrid, you want to, if you're going to do it, you want to make as much money as you can, as fast as you can, as easily as you can. So my first initial target is what's called the ENR, which is the Engineering News Record Top 400. That's like the Fortune 500, but for construction. Billion-dollar companies. Many of them on the Fortune 500 list. However, the sales cycle is really long. It could be years. And previously or somehow they've had some bad experiences. And so you can't just like sell to the top and they implement it through the whole organization. It's the other way around now for the big guys. You have to find an internal champion who believes in what you're doing and is willing to pilot it on a project. And if that project is successful, you're green lighted or approved to work with regional projects. And then if those go well, then you can get an enterprise deal and make the big bucks. So I started going down that path. I had letters of intent, and I still spend a portion of my time doing that. And we have a pilot project coming on in January with one of the world's largest general contractors. I'm super pumped about. But our biggest customers are, or most of our customers are smaller to medium-sized contractors. So concrete guys, electrical guys, plumbing guys, HVAC guys. They don't have a CIO, they don't have a CTO, they have an owner who's trying to find a better way and save money and save time and cover his ass. So that's our sweet spot.
We have a property management company and we're constantly everything the way you described taking pictures of it, we do that for every property that we manage. So, but it doesn't necessarily get assigned to anyone. It just needs to be tracked. And like obviously for property management, the accountability is if the tenant says, no, that was broken when I came here, we need pictures of everything. We've gotten a couple systems that seem to work well, but I feel like being able to assign it, especially if we already have those photos, if a maintenance request came up, we could just assign it to whatever vendor we use, or if we had, the in-house maintenance piece, we could assign it and we already have the pictures. That would be cool. But yeah, no, interesting.
Yeah, let's set you up with an account and you can play around with it. Like I have another customer who owns, I'm in San Diego, right? Who owns 14 tanning salons. And these tanning salons are high maintenance. Equipment breaks all the time, the spray tan or the bed or whatever. And if it breaks, people can't use it. Revenue goes down, bad experience. They don't buy their subscription or their passes, right? So before Pixly, this owner would literally drive to 14 different locations a week fixing things himself. It was like nonstop. Now that he has Pixly, each location manager has an account. They take a photo or a video of the equipment that needs to be repaired. They use 3 tags. Tag 1 needs to be fixed like today. Tag 2 needs to be fixed within a week. Tag 3 within a month. And then he assigns it through our punch list to 2 or 3 people in the field. And then he can sit back in his home office or wherever he's at and see what's happening or not based on who's been assigned certain things. So there's a whole bunch of other use cases too. We are talking to some of the really big commercial property management companies, and we can also integrate with anybody too.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, if nothing else, just to kind of see what you're doing and give you a consumer feedback.
I love feedback. Yeah, that feedback's gold, man. I would also say like start selling what you have before you have it, like, and talk to people that are not your friends, because your friends don't want to hurt your feelings. Go talk to strangers and say, do you have
Right.
a problem? If I had a solution for this problem and it was like this, would you buy it? And talk to as many of those people as you can. And because otherwise you just don't want to waste time building something that people won't pay for.
Right. Yeah, see, I just have Griffin that just cheers me along every time I give him my weekly or monthly update. I'm like, hey, this is going how this is going. He's like, great job. This sounds awesome.
I'm just the hype guy. I'm no
Yeah.
value.
Hype guys have huge value, man. People need to know they're doing a good job. I mean, like, it's, actually, like, the one thing that really sucked about leaving the Navy, and you'll never find it ever again, is when you leave, is the camaraderie. Like, you'll never ever have that again, man. That's the one thing I miss the most. I have some shipmates I'm still friends with, but
Mhm.
as a founder and entrepreneur, very few people will ever tell you good job. You have to tell yourself good job.
Yep.
So being a hype man definitely has value, man. I'll hire you as my hype man.
Yeah, no, that's
Sold.
been a recurring theme for sure. Just also not just like, hey, this is how you can maybe transition into a job that will pay you, but it's like, hey, people who have already made the transition, we've already dealt with, hey, how do we find that camaraderie or how do we mimic it? If it's not the same, how do we at least fill that void that is left from leaving the military and how do you, it's like, not to tie in just like but it is, it's like physical health, mental health, relationships. How do you maintain all of those things that were just done for you when you're in the military? And you already mentioned, it seems like you've reached out to at least like having those points of contact or those organizations that you're a part of, but you're right. Like the military does do the camaraderie piece incredibly well. It's hard to
Yeah,
mimic.
that's the best part. I mean, yeah,
One of my absolute best commanders in the Army said, the military may not compensate you financially, but it compensates you very generously in adventure and camaraderie. And I think that's such a true way of summarizing the value of the military. And there's plenty of time, obviously, to be compensated financially afterwards. But it's very, like, as we're saying, it's very hard to re-grasp that camaraderie and that adventure that the military offers, which is special. And I certainly didn't appreciate it as much as I probably should have while I was in. Lee, before we gloss over this, I think you said something incredibly powerful that also hits at something that most military folks may not fully appreciate is sell things before you build them. I think that the military in particular kind of preaches, you know, failure to plan is planning to fail. So, everyone wants to put together a great concept of operations. They want to put together the best plan, but that doesn't necessarily always translate perfectly to the startup or venture world. I mean, yes, you want to have a plan, but can you talk more about selling things before you build them, actually having a proof of concept, having market feedback before putting together all the ones and zeros and buying the domain or incorporating the company or whatever it might be? Can you talk about that process?
for sure, for sure. And plans fail. Like my plan, like I would not be here if it wasn't for the veteran fund, that competition winnings, and being a veteran, having pure grit, because my initial plans A and B failed. I had backup plan for backup plan. I getting plan for COVID, but
Well, and
anyway,
that may be a great point there too. I mean, in the military, if you fail, that's like lives lost. But in the startup world or in the business world, failure in a lot of ways is encouraged, and it's a really good thing to learn from that and move on. So maybe you can include that too.
yeah, it's sometimes you have to know when to let go, I guess, on certain things. Like, yeah, I'm super bullish on Pixie. I'm going to see it through. But yeah, if you have an idea, whether it's buying a food truck or a software company or creating a software company or going some type of job or providing some type of service, make sure there's a market for it and understand that market and what's important to them. And there's no harm in asking people if they buy in on an idea, or if you're even talking to friends or family, they'd invest and help you build or create that idea. It can be humbling to ask for help, but you need to ask for help. It's really hard to do this by yourself. That's why having a co-founder helps. But yeah, so I had this idea because I went to all these different job sites of all sizes. I saw this same problem that wasn't really being addressed. It's kind of a part of a problem of an overall construction management problem. And some people will say the riches are in the niches. So if you solve a specific problem, that's awesome. It doesn't have to be a huge market. You don't have to solve, it'd be great if you could solve cancer or arthritis or something, that'd be great. But if you could solve a certain problem for a certain market effectively, efficiently, and profitably, that's fantastic no matter what it is. It could be a cleaning company. There's nothing wrong with owning a cleaning company. There could be high margins in that. Or a garage. I had a guy come by and fix my garage door. He was here for like 45 minutes. And it cost me like $500. And I'm like, hey, do you mind me asking you something? Like, how much did that spring cost? He's like, you really want to know? I'm like, yeah, I want to know. It's like $40. I'm like, wow, good for you, man. You just made like 450. He's like, well, keep in mind, I've got my truck, I've got my business insurance, I paid to get your lead. and all these things, but he still made really, really good money. So everybody has a garage door and those springs break. That's just one of a million ideas. For the software stuff, you kind of want to be able to eloquently speak to it, but it helps to have some type of visualization. If it's in PowerPoint or Google Slides, it could just be boxes and like of what it is. But I went from boxes to like more conceptual designs and showed like if you switch screens, what it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had mock-ups of that designed. So what it would actually look like, the full design. And then I chose, usually when I do a design project, I ask for 3 concepts. And I usually want a little bit of each 3 to create the final one. But I did that, and I worked with an offshore development team. I prefer to only work with Americans in America, and I plan to and will make a priority to hire veterans every chance I can. But there's also, get as much done with as little as possible. So I've been burned a few times, but I also found a fantastic partner offshore in India that basically they're my partners. I wouldn't be here without them either. The other thing is when you're a startup and you're just getting going, like you might be a customer to somebody, but the way you treat them will also impact how much the quality of the work and if they'll go the extra mile for you. So treat everybody in your network that's trying to help you build something as like a partner.
Absolutely. But can we zoom in just a bit more? So, do you have any specific? You mentioned building out basically a PowerPoint mock-up of your idea, going around to construction sites, showing that to potential end users, and seeing kind of how they
Yes.
react to it. Do you have any
Yeah.
other stories or like concrete examples of how you've sold something before you've built it? There's
I,
a Yeah, go
I
ahead.
actually have a great story. This is a fantastic story. Actually, I have 2 quick stories. I don't know how much more time we have.
Yeah, go for it.
So when I came up with this idea for Pixly, I reached out to a guy that was a paid influencer for Raken, a guy I really liked and I really respected. And I said, Carl, what do you think about this idea? Seen all these job sites. I think this is a solution that could be solved for everybody, every shape and size. He's like, dude, I love it. Can I invest? And he was my first investor.
Hmm.
And that was like when somebody, offers to invest before you ask them, man, that's a rare, beautiful, beautiful thing. But that's when I knew I was onto something, because not only did he come from the industry and was an influencer, but he wanted to invest in the company. And then
Hmm.
I took the same idea in concept, and I reached out to a lot of these bigger companies that I already had relationships with. So throughout your career, post-military and back to the military, you're going to have your own network of people. And the guys and girls that you served with are going to go off to different companies. And yeah, really quick side note, when I'm prospecting, I'll go to LinkedIn Sales Navigator and I'll look for the people I'm trying to find, and I'll put in former company, Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, right? And then you have that veteran connection, which can help you open doors faster. But back to the point is, I would take those mock-ups and I'd reach out to my target customers and I'd basically throw it out there and cold call them and email them and say, hey, I'm Lee Mills, a Navy veteran. I'm an entrepreneur. I got this idea for a construction, photo, visual documentation and collaboration platform. Before I said Snap, Tag, Share, Google Photos, Instagram, Slack. Do you mind giving me feedback on it? And a lot of these people they'll give you feedback on it. Like the bigger companies for me have innovation teams. So they're supposed to look at stuff. But if you're a business owner and a founder, even if it's your first day, other business owners will respect what it takes to take that first step and will probably try and help you. So don't be afraid to just basically product validation, market validation, customer validation. Is there a market for it? Do you solve a problem that people will pay for?
Hmm.
And talk to, I don't know, at least I'd say 100 people. Of course, talk to your friends and family first and practice, but go talk to complete strangers that you do not know to get the real feedback that you need.
I generally fall into that camp as well, as far as like just communicate what your ideas are with a lot of different people. And not only will that give their feedback to you, but you'll also have a chance to actually talk through it 100 times. So that way, when you are talking to that person who does matter, who might be writing a check, you've already had the experience talking through and actually basically pitching it to many different people. But I have received feedback from some mentors that are a little bit more closed on like not sharing ideas as freely. And I guess, I love your reaction there, because that was my reaction. But I think, to your point, like communicate what you're doing And the connections oftentimes, in my opinion, will have more of a impact than the risk of somebody taking your idea and
Yeah.
doing it better than you, especially if you're driven to make waves in an industry, you're gonna do it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I'm like, I mean, I'll tell you my idea, but you have to sign an NDA. I'm like, come on, bro. Like, I got
Right.
other things I could do. I'm not going to take your idea. Um,
Right.
I can see
Right.
why, I don't know. I can see why some people might be paranoid, but you got to really put yourself out there in every way possible with customers and investors and finding people to help you. If you can't afford to pay, a developer or development shop full rate, negotiating something that's performance or makes more sense, like you have to be a people person. Not a people pleaser. There's a difference, but a people person.
Lee, there's a great, well, I say it's a great book. It's a new book, but by Noah Kagan. You might have seen him on social media, called The $1 Million Weekend, where he talks about the exact same concept that you're speaking to here. Like basically selling something before you've built it, having those client conversations well in advance, and you can tell so much about the direction something's going to go based off of those preliminary conversations and save yourself a lot of time, frustration, money, etc.
Oh, yeah. I would also say when you're hiring somebody or a firm, check their references, like literally call them, talk to somebody on the phone. Also, be very aware of people that try and sell you investor introductions and investor networks for a fee. I wave off from that. I came really close to hiring one company. They made it sound so good to be true. I called the reviews that they had, the testimonials on their website, and three of them said, no way, don't do it. They sent out one email for me. That was it. And we're talking like a $10,000 package. So
Wow.
just be wary. I mean, I want to believe everybody's good people and they're doing the right thing and above board, but there are people out there that will try and take advantage of first-time founders and entrepreneurs and promise things that they can't deliver. So just be really, really careful.
Well, and talking to a lot of founders and others, similar people in the space through this podcast, we've learned that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a much bigger appetite for competent, driven founders than there is a lack of money. I mean, if you're looking to raise capital, you should there's a pretty easy, I can't say easy, but there's ready access to capital.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
more capital looking for founders like yourself than there are founders looking for capital, because if you go searching, you'll find it without having to pay $10,000 to somebody that's going to send you one email.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, another thing on that, like depending on what you're doing, like as an early founder, like, oh wow, these guys reached out to me. I'm so flattered. Like they're gonna write a check like a big VC firm. No, they're just trying to fill their pipeline. They might even be trying to do just in research on potential competitors. I would not spend any time talking to unless you're really raising money, don't even talk to them. And if you are raising money, say, ask these questions. How big is your fund? How much is left of your funds, left to deploy? Who got your last check? How much was that last check? When did they get that last check? And what do I need to do? Where does my company need to be to qualify? Because if they say, well, you have to be $5 million in ARR, I'm like, well, then let's not waste each other's time. I'll call you when I'm there.
Wise words, man. Yeah, lead with those questions before giving them your full your full playbook. Not to be close hold to
Yeah.
our earlier conversation, but yeah, you don't want to waste anyone's time, especially not your own. Lee, the two-part question that we ask as we start to wrap up here of every guest is one ask and one give. So starting off with, what's one way that others could add value or help you?
Yeah, if you are a building owner, if you're a contractor, if you're a field service pro, if you need to document your work and you're sick of the chaos of the normal workflows I just talked about, try Pixly for free. Get in touch with me. I can give you a demo in 10 minutes. If you're a veteran, I'll hook you up with a free account or a massive discount depending on what you want. That would be my ask. And then my give is I actually talked to a guy yesterday who told me his 2024 goal was to make 200 introductions to his network. So my offer is like, if there's anybody in my network, I think I've got like 16,000 something on LinkedIn, or if there's anything I could do to help anybody or answer any questions, feel free to hit me up directly and I'll do my best to help you out. I just want to pay it forward. And I think this is awesome to be on this podcast. My transition was brutal. Taps was absolutely awful. I can't even get into it. They're just like, get out of San Diego, go home. Here's a folder. It was awful. But if I can inspire anybody, like go for it. Just do it. You can do it. You can do anything. If you can make it through the military, you can make it through anything, and give it a shot. You won't regret it.
Well, thank you for that, Lee. Are you raising capital currently? Is that a potential another ask?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, if you know anybody that's interested in investing in a fast-growing B2B SaaS platform with AI solving a massive problem, we are raising our seed angel round right now, and I brought a
Awesome.
little bit so far, and yeah, I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped.
Well, it's great to see the work that you're doing, Lee. Thanks for your willingness to help other veterans, other startup founders. I mean, that goes such a long way. You know, do you have any? You've given so much advice already, but any final thoughts or kind of piece of advice for someone who might be considering the transition out of the military or currently transitioning right now?
Yeah, I would. Yes. So I spent a lot of years when I first got out just chasing money. Like I gotta have this, I gotta have that, I want this, I want that, and like making up for time. And I wound up making some bad decisions. I worked for people that I didn't like or didn't respect, and for longer than I should have. I missed out on taking vacations and doing things that I should have done to like have a balanced life. I was just like so hardcore about work and so dedicated that I forgot the importance of mind, body, spirit. So I've had a few near-death experiences in my life. So every day I wake up, I'm just grateful I can put my feet on the ground. But my message is, man, if you could take a half hour, an hour every day to exercise, you got to do that for yourself. And you got to take care of your family more than anything. But yourself, your family, your health. Otherwise, you're going to be useless no matter what you're doing. So yoga
100%.
I wouldn't say saved my life, but yoga is kind of like a lifesaver. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I just absolutely have to. You'll never regret it. You got to make that time.
None of those near-death experiences were surfing related, right?
I had one. I went over the falls backwards, surfing some big waves in Ocean Beach, and I didn't think I was going to make it up. But the worst one, I was riding my dirt bike in this place called Glamis, which is like Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. Anybody ride motorcycles out there? And I thought I was going up the sand dune that went like this, except it went like this. And that gap, you can't tell, it's called a razorback. So I flew off the lip of this razorback, and I woke up in the hospital with a broken back. I compression fractured my L1 to L5 and like 1/100th of a millimeter from being paralyzed.
Wow.
Worked. So I have no bad days. I'm like, I have no bad days.
Wow.
And then not too long ago, while I was working for PlanGrid actually, and this was actually a major changing point in my life. I was just working like crazy for PlanGrid. It was the sanfrancisco.com. It's going to be the one. It's going to change my life. I was riding my bike home from watching the sunset and I got hit by a car. And I woke up and there was nobody there. Like they left me there. And so I was like, wow, how could a human being do that to somebody else? So be careful riding your bike too.
Wow.
No way.
Yeah. But that's why I have no bad days. Like trust me, life can be really, really hard. Being a founder, being an entrepreneur is like a kick in the pants 9 times out of 10. But when you do get a customer validation or somebody wants to buy or wants to invest or believes in you, and it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, I've heard that being a founder or there's certain industries like you wake up unemployed like every day. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
how do you strive to get that job every day?
Yeah. I mean, you got to do it, man. I mean, you just got to make it happen, and you have to believe in it. You have to believe you can do it.
Yeah. Super inspiring. I appreciate, everything you're doing for veterans and not just veterans too. You're clearly making a huge impact on the larger community of San Diego too. So that's awesome. It was really great having you on. I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was an honor.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.